Imagine starting your family business in a modest castle in Switzerland and ending up running half the world. Sounds like a medieval rags to riches story, right? Well, that's essentially what the Habsburg dynasty did, and they didn't even need a YouTube tutorial on how to become an emperor. Our story begins in the 11th century in what is now northern Switzerland. The Habsburg family started out as local counts. Think of them as middle management in the feudal system. Their ancestral castle, Habsburg, still stands today, though I bet they didn't expect their family name would become synonymous with one of history's most powerful dynasties. Now, while other noble families were busy fighting wars to expand their territories, the Habsburgs discovered a much more cost efficient strategy: marriage. Lots and lots of marriage. They basically turned matrimony into an art form. Their unofficial motto might as well have been make love, not war, though they were pretty good at war too when they needed to be. Enter Rudolf I, the Habsburg who changed everything. In 1273, he was elected King of the Romans, basically the Holy Roman Emperor in all but name. Now, you might wonder how a Swiss count ended up being chosen for such a prestigious position. Well, it's actually quite funny. The prince electors wanted someone who wouldn't be too powerful. Talk about a miscalculation. You see, after the previous imperial dynasty, the Hohenstaufens, had caused all sorts of trouble, the electors wanted someone manageable. They looked at Rudolf and thought, this guy seems harmless enough. Little did they know, they were casting the lead role in one of history's greatest political success stories. Rudolf proved to be anything but manageable. He quickly showed he had the political skills of a chess grandmaster and the determination of a medieval entrepreneur. His first major move, taking Austria from King Ottokar of Bohemia. It's like he read real estate investment for medieval monarchs and decided to start with prime Central European property. This acquisition of Austria would prove to be the cornerstone of the Habsburg Empire. Think of it as their first successful startup acquisition, and boy, did they scale up from there. Vienna became their new headquarters, and they began building what would become one of medieval Europe's most efficient administrative systems. But the Habsburgs weren't just conquering territories. They were master administrators. They developed sophisticated systems of governance, established efficient trade networks, and transformed cities into thriving centers of commerce and culture. Their administrative prowess was so remarkable that they effectively managed territories spanning continents, coordinating everything from military campaigns to diplomatic missions with impressive efficiency. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Swiss cantons, their original home base, decided they preferred independence, and a bit like a startup losing its first office space. The Battle of Morgarten in 1315 was particularly embarrassing for the Habsburgs, but like any good dynasty, they learned from their setbacks and focused on more promising opportunities, namely everywhere else in Central Europe. The Habsburgs also understood the importance of branding. They became patrons of the arts, built impressive buildings and palaces, and developed elaborate court celebrations. They weren't just ruling an empire. They were creating a lifestyle brand that would influence European culture for centuries. But perhaps their greatest skill was in their marriage policy. The Habsburgs turned marriage into a geopolitical superpower. They arranged unions with mathematical precision, creating a network of family ties that would make modern social media influencers jealous. Their famous motto said it all: Bella gerant ali, tu felix Austria nube. Let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry. By the end of the 15th century, the Habsburgs had transformed themselves from minor Swiss nobles into one of Europe's most powerful dynasties. But their greatest triumph and biggest challenges were yet to come. The stage was set for a remarkable transformation that would turn this family of simple counts into a global empire. Want to know how the Habsburgs went from the European power players to global superpower? How did they handle the religious upheaval, the Ottoman expansion, and the challenge of ruling an empire where the sun never set? Stay tuned for part 2 of our Habsburg saga, where things get real. When we left our Habsburg saga, the family had already pulled off one of history's most impressive political climbs, from Swiss counts to rulers of a Central European empire. In their quest to expand, the Habsburgs were about to acquire some prime properties. Enter Maximilian I, the Habsburg who would transform the burgeoning family kingdom into a global empire. Think of him as the Renaissance version of a tech innovator. He modernized everything he touched. Military updated, administration streamlined, postal service created. This guy was living in 1500 but thinking in 1800. Maximilian's first power move, marrying Mary of Burgundy in 1477. This wasn't just any marriage. It was like acquiring the medieval equivalent of Silicon Valley. The Burgundian territories included the Netherlands, which was basically the economic powerhouse of Northern Europe. This strategy is beyond the battlefield. But Maximilian wasn't done playing matchmaker. He arranged what historians call the double marriage alliance with Spain. His son Philip married Joanna of Castile, while his daughter Margaret married Joanna's brother. It's like he was playing medieval dynasty tycoon and decided to go all in. These marriages paid off big time when Maximilian's grandson, Charles V, hit the royal inheritance jackpot. By 1519, he ruled an empire including Spain, the Netherlands, much of Italy, and vast territories in the Americas. It was the empire where the sun never set, though I bet keeping track of all those time zones was a real headache. Managing this massive empire was a huge logistical endeavor. Just getting the message from Spain to Austria could take weeks or even months, depending on whether the armies, pirates, or any sort of enemies that got in your way. Charles V had to deal with the Protestant Reformation, Ottoman expansion, and French rivalry. Talk about a full inbox. Speaking of the Protestant Reformation, this was like having major disruption in your industry. The Habsburgs, as defenders of Catholicism, had to balance religious conviction with practical politics. It's hard enough running an empire without having to worry about theological debates, but such was the life of a Habsburg ruler. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire was expanding into Europe like California wildfires, threatening the existence of Christendom in Europe. The Habsburgs found themselves serving as Christianity's first line of defense. The Siege of Vienna in 1529 was a pivotal moment in the consolidation of the Habsburg dynasty. They successfully defended the Ottoman incursion into European lands and expelled the infidels. Eventually, even the Habsburgs had to admit that their empire had grown too big to manage. Charles V split the empire in 1556, creating two entities, Spanish and Austrian. While this split created two distinct Habsburg lines, both branches continued to shape European history through their cultural influence, administrative systems, and political power. The Habsburgs weren't just about power politics. They were cultural innovators too. They were patrons to artists, built magnificent palaces, and created elaborate court ceremonies. The Habsburg court became Europe's trendsetter. If medieval Instagram had existed, they would have been major influencers. They also developed sophisticated administrative systems. The Habsburg bureaucracy was like a medieval version of a modern corporation, complete with departments, standardized procedures, and probably too many meetings. They understood that running an empire required more than just wearing a crown. It needed systems and structures. Of course, maintaining such a vast empire came with challenges. Financial pressures were constant. Turns out running an empire is expensive. Religious conflicts, succession crises, and rival powers all posed persistent threats. The Habsburgs had to be masters of crisis management. The Habsburg ability to maintain power through successive generations was remarkable. Their famous family features, the Habsburg jaw, became a brand trademark, though perhaps not one they would have chosen for themselves. Their marriage policy continued, though it eventually led to some genetic challenges, a reminder that too much family business can be problematic. The Habsburg Empire would continue to shape European history until its dissolution in 1918. The dynasty that started in a modest Swiss castle ended up ruling much of Europe for centuries, creating lasting impacts on politics, culture, and society. that we can still see today. The Habsburg story is more than just a tale of power and politics. It's a masterclass in building and maintaining political enterprise. Through strategic marriage, administrative innovations, cultural patronage, and sheer persistence, they created one of history's most enduring power structures. Today, when we look at the remaining Habsburg palaces, read about their elaborate ceremonies, or see their portraits in museums, we're witnessing the legacy of one of history's most successful family dynasties. They might have started as Swiss counts, but they ended up mastering the art of imperial rule in a way few families have ever matched. Thanks for joining us in this journey through the Habsburg saga. Remember, whether you're building an empire or just trying to get through your day, it's all about strategy and maybe a few well planned marriages.